Cylinder two-stroke engines that stood vertically. At the bottom of the engines they had a 90-degree miter box that was coupled to the shaft and controllable pitch propeller. All of that stuff has been removed and there are now fixed propellers. They're approximately 4.5 feet in diameter, but we don't know what the pitch is. These engines were brand new in 1964. These are old, what they call dry block engines. There's no coolant below the inlet ports. And in 1965 they were upgraded to what were called wet blocks with coolant passages. Production gears twin disc. They're 4-to-1 gearboxes. The furnace just did. And these engines were freshened up in the 90s, and the boat was virtually never used after that. If you look underneath the engines, there's a large drip pan under here so that everything that leaks out of these engines goes into that pan instead of the bilge. Hopefully there's enough light down there and it gets both pads. These engines have been run regularly when the boat was unused, under load, tied to the dock, and they appear to be in fantastic condition. This is the switchboard and generator control panel. The entire boat, for the most part, is 110 volt DC, supplied through batteries that are in this battery box. And generally, why they use DC was there were no paralleling problems with DC generators. You just start them up, close the switch, and adjust the voltage, which also adjusts the load. So there's 3 generators on this boat. There's this one here. I don't remember how many kilowatts it is. And it is belt driven to the crankshaft on the starboard engine. There's a little air-cooled blister here. I don't remember how many watts it is. I can read the label, which is going to require a whole lot more light. Noisy little bastard, and it has no starter. It's got a crank over there. You put on the crankshaft, you throw these compression releases over, and you crank your brains out, and it takes right off. This Perkins here probably came out of a tractor. It was overhauled when it was put in here, and I think we figured this was 10 or 12 kilowatts. hasn't run in about 6 years. They stopped using it because it developed an oil leak. Well, we got it started to determine where the oil leak was, and it was just a little loose oil filter. And after all those years, it started right up and worked perfectly. There is a 35 amp inverter. Let's see, is this 35 amps? No, 25 amps. So there's very few items on the boat that have to be run with AC. We even charged our telephones and iPads on DC, and they were perfectly happy with it. This looks really scary, but it's not as scary as it looks. So with this engine mounted generator, it makes sufficient power at 1400 RPM, which is a nice sedate cruising RPM, to supply all the loads. When we're on shore tie, there are battery chargers to keep the battery bank charged up. And it's a 110 volt battery bank. I can't tell you how many batteries are in there, but they are fairly new, and they just ran into a light, and they have been maintained. This is a day tank where all the fuel for everything except the main engines comes from. So every morning when the main engines aren't running, you have to transfer fuel into this tank to keep the furnace going. This feeds 2 generators, the stove, and the furnace. Fuel manifolds under these deck plates. This is the fuel transfer system. So you would fire this up and fill up that day tank. When the main engines are running, they draw fuel off the manifold and return it back to the day tank and keep it full. Fuel is always circulating through the main engines, so out of say 40 gallons per hour, 50 gallons per hour, most of it comes back here through this fill line, and when the tank is full, it goes out of this return line and goes back into the fuel tank.